I would like to warmly welcome everyone to our episode of World of Short Selling. Each week I'm going to look at what has happened in the past week, what new campaigns you should know about, and what could still be actionable opportunities. This week I'm going to look at two new campaigns. One will be from Citron Research about the infamous bike company Peloton, subscribers of which are now valued by the market with the price of one bike and 28 years of their subscription plans. Citron believes that this makes the company extremely overvalued. The other will be from Aurlies Value, which target NBIX, a pharma company which employed at least 64 employees from Avanir, which had to pay a large fine for allegations of fraud and kickbacks. Chief Commercial Officer of NBIX is supposedly the same person as the one who was heavily involved with the alleged kickback scheme in Avanir. I will also provide an update regarding 18X, which is the short of Viceroy Research, and talk about a relatively new short-selling website called Utopia Capital and their focus on small caps, which showcase supposedly dubious share price action. Before we start, I would just like to remind you that all you hear on the podcast are opinions. I'm not a registered investment advisor. Please do your own due diligence. Short selling can hold risks that are different to going long. I would also like to thank Breakout Point for the data I used in preparation for the podcast. Breakout Point is a great software tool for investors interested in tracking ongoing short campaigns. Before I start with Peloton, I would also like to mention that I am not going to talk about two campaigns. One from Wolfpack, which targeted a US-listed Chinese stock, which they called just another example of China hustle. The second campaign is by Bonitas, which targeted a stock which is in some ways similar to Wolfpack's target. Although I'm not going to mention them, I would really recommend checking these reports out. They are certainly worth a read. But now on to one of the 6 major campaigns released this week. Citron's report was on Peloton, PTON, a $8.8 billion maker of the famous indoor exercise bike and now one infamous Christmas ad attached to it. Citron targeted Peloton due to allegedly a clear overvaluation and promotional management team. The seasoned short seller said that they were regretting the fact that they did not short GoPro more back when the gadget company was touted as the next big thing. With Peloton, well, they should have the chance according to their report. Citron sees both parts of the business as problematic. The hardware part is not attractive. The Peloton bike now has a variety of alternatives that are essentially identical and cost a third of the price of Peloton. Some are even sold for a no upfront payment, just a monthly recurring subscription with no interest. The digital part of the business, the app connected to the bike, is also facing serious challenges according to the report. Most importantly, it is by no means exclusive to the Peloton bike. The only difference between the $39.99 version, which is only available with the bike, and the $12.99 version is really the leaderboards. However, other companies have focused on this aspect as well and introduced their own competitions. Therefore, people can easily just spend $12.99, buy a cheaper bike, attach a smartphone, and have their own version of Peloton at a substantially lower price. This way, they just circumvented both of the key propositions of Peloton as a business. All this then raises questions about current valuation, especially if you account for PTON's subscriber base through enterprise value divided by subscriber. The subscriber is the one exciting asset that can generate cash flow in the future. Essentially, through this valuation, one can understand how the market is pricing an average subscriber to Peloton. Citron's calculations show that the average subscriber is now valued at $15,600, which is 2,286% above a group of peers that they selected. One other way to look at it is that the average subscriber is now worth one Peloton bike and 28 years of subscription. This would be one heck of a loyalty for the average subscriber. Sure, you can argue that they're going to keep on growing, but the recent numbers do not point to another doubling of their subscriber base in the next year. The stock is now down about 11% since the report, but be sure that this is going to be a volatile ride when 65% of the float is supposedly short. Obviously, there are option contracts here, but they remain quite pricey, so either way, one will need to carefully weigh the risks of having a position here. However, there are some inherent catalysts here. Citron sees the expiry of a lockup in March 2020 as one such thing that could pressure the shares in the near future. Perhaps the last point I would raise is that I would be extremely interested in a stock whose business is to mimic Peloton. Recently, I did a great interview with Ian Bezek, and I believe he raised a very good point. Do not short the biggest company producing the fad, short the Me Too names. While Citron clearly brings up great points that should make shorting Peloton eventually profitable, if there are Me Too names here, they might be even more interesting. In any case, in my view, Peloton is certainly overvalued. I mean, the company reminds me of one tech startup that I saw a couple of years back, which was focused on creating immersive videos for TVs that simulate a run in nature. You would have this big TV and on it a video of some landscape while you slave away on a treadmill instead of just going outside. This is also relevant since Peloton released their own treadmill, which however disappointed so far. The second stock I would like to look at today is ATNX, which is the short of Viceroy Research. I have covered ATNX several times before. Last time I gave a comprehensive update on the thesis around this now $1 billion biotech company. The short thesis has two parts. First, it is a classic biotech short. What I mean by that is Viceroy believes the drugs in the pipeline are not going to pan out and are not valuable. Second, according to Viceroy, ATNX should be a complete corporate governance nightmare. Insiders are allegedly self-dealing. Just as an example, Viceroy is alleging that insiders of ATNX bought a license from Hong Kong Polytechnic University for themselves at a price of $150,000. 6 months later, they sold it to ATNX for $5 million, thus potentially siphoning cash from shareholders of ATNX. The insiders are also connected to well-known frauds such as Sin of Forest. This week, we had developments on the biotech front as ATNX presented data connected to Oraxol, its main drug, in a presentation in San Antonio. As is evident from the share price action, the market was not really impressed. The shares went down by about 15% on Friday. While longs were excited about the data, the short sellers pointed out few points which seemed to prove the initial thesis might be right. First of all, the data was not really different from what was announced in August. One of the main issues raised was the fact that Oraxol was compared with existing treatments. However, these existing treatments had a 3-week dosage, which is worse than 1-week dosage, creating questions whether Oraxol was tested against the right treatment. Secondly, the test was not done in the US, and thus, according to some, the FDA might force ATNX to do another test in order to make sure the standard of care is going to be the same as in the US. It will be certainly interesting to track the developments in the next week and in early 2020 when the company will sit down with the FDA after NDA submission. The third stock I want to mention is Neurocrine Biosciences, which was targeted by Aurlies Value. The well-known short seller targeted the $10 billion company mainly due to its management, which has dubious past to say the least, supposedly. Aurelius targeted several key insiders, such as the Chief Commercial Officer of NBIX, the ticker of the company, Eric Benovich, the architect of NBIX sales and marketing process. Mr. Benovich was previously employed by Avanir, a pharma company which was sued by the government for fraud and kickback schemes in which Mr. Benovich was heavily involved in, according to Aurelius. The company actually hired at least 64 former employees of the now disgraced Avanir, whose revenues have largely disappeared, and the company had to pay $108 million in fines. The report therefore alleges that the bad behavior seen in Avanir is now happening in NBIX. One regional manager of NBIX was in September indicted by the grand jury for his time at Avanir. He was apparently also involved with the kickback scheme. While employing the same people does not necessarily have to equal the same behavior, there are red flags raised by Aurelius that should interest investors. Most importantly, NBIX is paying significant speaking fees to doctors. General speaking fees are the usual target of allegations regarding potential kickback schemes, or in other words, bribes. NBIX paid $4.6 million in such speaking fees in 2018 alone, which even exceeds the heydays of Avanir, which collapsed because of these. These millions of dollars were then dispersed among doctors, which then, supposedly, should have written more prescription for drugs of NBIX. What is noteworthy is that 36 of the 40 of the top paid doctors were also paid by Avanir. NBIX paid these doctors in excess of $50,000 per doctor in 1 year. The stock dipped a bit on the day of the report, but it is now just a bit lower than prior to the release. The management has yet to respond to the report or the allegations. Piper Jaffray reaffirmed its buy rating on NBIX after the report. It is fair to point out, however, that the analyst attached to NBIX is none other than the one who also had a buy rating on INSY, which was the opioid stock that now brandishes the Q letter at the end of the ticker. It will be interesting to track what happens next at NBIX and whether Aurelius will successfully predict an investigation. In the meantime, some commenters raised an interesting point. The market might not care about the allegations for now. Speaking fees are usually dubious, but they are commonplace. Many large drug companies settled these kinds of allegations. Thus, NBIX might just face such a one-off expense and might continue to earn similar amounts of money. However, in any case, there could be a trading opportunity here, even if in the long run, NBIX is able to continue operate relatively unharmed. Finally, I would like to highlight the effort of a relatively new website called Utopia Capital, which publishes reports aimed at small caps which, according to the website, saw dubious price action in recent weeks. They essentially focus on small caps, of which the stock prices increased without many underlying changes in the fundamentals. This price action could raise potential red flags. Utopia Capital then goes through a research process to look for these possible red flags. They look at possible promotion, volume of shares traded, historical price action, whether the stock is prone to dilution, what is the management like, and what other third parties are working for the company, be it lawyers, accountants, or brokers. This creates a relatively verifiable process which can be easily understood. Once the stock showcases a fair bit of these red flags, Utopia writes about it and highlights it as a potential short opportunity. An example can be GRN Holding Corporation. GRNF is the ticker. This small cap was actually covered by White Diamond Research as well. This is essentially a shell company which was touting its future business plans. It also featured an interesting CEO who first said he graduated from Harvard, only to change his mind later on. He was also recently arrested after threatening employees of some lodge and spa in the state of Washington. The case is closed, but this does not seem like a great PR stunt to say the least. Despite all this, the stock actually skyrocketed from 60 cents to about $1.7 per share, only to trade back to now 54 cents. While some of the other targets of Utopia are not as colorful, so to speak, they might be interesting for short sellers that do not mind a bit of volatility. And with that, that is it for this week. If you're interested in something I talked about, do not hesitate to check out the description. There are all the tickers alongside the reports I mentioned. If you enjoy this episode, do not forget to subscribe to the podcast. There will be new content each week. Thanks a lot for listening.